Hi friends, if you're like me, it takes you approximately 2 days to get through an entire box of those meringues from Trader Joe's. I love the chocolate ones and the vanilla ones, and they're so good, and I just can't stop eating them. It tastes like you're eating a giant Lucky Charms marshmallow. They're so good. Or you're a photographer that wants to talk about touching up your images. That sounds like you, we should talk. I have been putting off this video for such a long time just because there is kind of a like moral, ethical, gray area dilemma type thing that comes with photoshopping images. I feel like as soon as I pull it into Photoshop and I start touching anybody's body, then I'm like, I had a conversation with a friend who was like, it makes me feel like a bad feminist. I had a conversation with somebody else who said, if somebody were to Photoshop something about me, I would feel really self-conscious about it, and I definitely wouldn't like for them to do it in front of an audience. So I was trying to think of a way that I can share something about this unspoken part of our jobs that I feel like we have a really hard time talking about in public spaces, because it's not something that I think we want our clients to feel self-conscious of. But also I want to acknowledge that when I Photoshop images, whenever I go in and like liquify a double chin or do anything like that, I am not doing it because I want somebody to adhere to a specific set of beauty standards. My goal is for all of the images to look consistent with how the person has presented themselves throughout the day. And sometimes I just take photos that don't best represent them, and I'm gonna show you because I have some photos of myself that I took. This is kind of the angle that we end up shooting people at sometimes, unfortunately, especially for ceremonies. We are always kind of like shooting a direct profile, and I do have clients sometimes that let me know that they are self-conscious about things, and I try my best to shoot them in the best light possible. But also sometimes there's a really nice moment that I want to deliver, but I feel like there's something about their clothing that's happening or a bulge that's happening that I just feel like is going to distract them from being able to live in the moment and appreciate the moment, because we do have these expectations. My goal as a service provider is to show people how their day felt and what it looked like. And if I take a photo where they look like they have a third leg, that photo doesn't represent what they look like. It's an anomaly. And so I will only Photoshop like up to 10 images from any given wedding. I like to say that I have a 2-week rule, and I let people know this in advance. If something is not gonna be there in 2 weeks that is there now, so if there's like razor burn or zits or a bruise, those things are things that I will typically get rid of. The things that will stay are things like scars, unless they have very specific requests to have those taken out. Moles, freckles, I want all of those things to stay a part of my clients because that's who they are. That being said, sometimes I put people in lighting situations where I don't have a lot of control, and there are textures and things that I want to get rid of. So I have examples of myself from my trip to Maine where I'm going to be showing you some stuff. I had a really hard time figuring out how to approach this, and I'm really hoping that this is going to be helpful because it's really kind of conceptual the way that I'm doing it. It's going to be like, okay, so this is the skill that we're learning. Now you can apply it to photos that you would like to see touched up a little bit to create a more cohesive look with the rest of the wedding day. Because sometimes we take photos that don't necessarily look like our clients looked for the rest of the day. And we are like luxury service providers. Feels like it's like a dirty thing to talk about. I feel so weird talking about it because I love photographing all different body sizes, and this is not about changing the size of somebody. This is literally about fixing a photo that's almost an outtake but a really great moment, because there's something that looks amiss with the rest of the set of images. I really hope I'm describing this well, and I hope this is helpful for you. I also had a friend express to me that she felt like it might actually be more helpful for you to see images of me because you see my face all the time and you know that I'm not creating an alternative version of myself, but I'm just changing how I look for the sake of this. I'm gonna start by going to this layer. I'm gonna duplicate this layer, which is Command J. You can also right click and go to like duplicate layer. And then I'm going to liquify, which is Command Shift X, or you can go to filter and then go down to liquify. So I am almost always going to use the little finger pusher guy. Size is 250, density is 50, pressure 100. I am gonna make it a little bit bigger, size 500, and I'm gonna start by pushing in this. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. I'm gonna push in this little area, make it bigger. Right here, I'm gonna pull out this area to try to make it look like there's less of an indentation. And then all I'm trying to do is smooth it out so there's like a single line right there. And then I'm gonna push this in so that there's more of a like straight angle. And then I'm just going to make it big enough so that I can sort of make the center of my circle line up with where I want to push my neck in. And I'm just gonna pull this back a little bit. make it smaller, push it back because I want it to be more of a straight angle. And then I think that's it for what I'm gonna do for liquefying. I'm not gonna do a ton. I'm gonna hit OK. You can see the difference that I've made here. And now I'm going to soften that line. So I'm going to hit S, which is the stamp tool, make it a little bit bigger. And I like to keep my flow around 10 when I'm doing things like this. So I'm going to hit Option so I can pick a place that's along this line to use from. So I'm gonna pick like right here as the sample, and then I'm gonna come over here. And at 10%, all this is gonna do is just lighten the line a little bit. I'm gonna resample further up and lighten that line a little bit. Again, we're at like 10%, so it's not doing much. Resampled again. Here we go. And I don't think I'm gonna get rid of the line altogether because it's just not how it was. But I might fix this so that it's more of a straight angle. The tricky part is when you're on a grid. You can see I've like pulled the doorway a little bit. So I might just grab some of the wall color and just flatten that out ever so slightly. And that's likely how I would do that here. Again, this is how much we've changed it. Not a ton, just enough to not make it look like I have that giant crease. If I wanted to get rid of it entirely, if that was bothering me, I could. I don't think this is gonna make it look like unreasonable. Yeah, that looks fine. And then if I wanted to bring in the chin more, I could. I don't think that I would, because I think that realistically, that's enough for it to be less distracting, and that is how I would do that one. There are also things that I've had clients tell me bother them, like gaps and bangs in hair. So we would do the exact same thing. I would hit S, so I would sample from right here where my hair is sort of coming down. I would sample from right there, and then I would come over here and I would just start filling it in. Again, we're at like 10%. And I wanna make sure that I'm not going to the point where I'm like drawing in the headband. I don't wanna get to that point. So if I see my headband, I'm just gonna move further over and just fill this in, and it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm gonna resample from this area and fill in a little bit more. And I'm actually keeping my eye on the little plus sign as I'm doing this, because I really wanna make sure that I'm not going into the ear or other areas. I'm gonna fill in one more little gap right here, and then fill in one more gap right here, and I'm gonna sample from right here to do that. And I'm gonna sample from right here to fill it in. And then I'm gonna fill in the hair closer to my ear. This isn't a thing that would bother me, but I have had people say like, let me know if you see my bangs separated. So zooming out, this is what I've done to this image. Those are things that I hope are helpful for like knowing that 10% flow is the best thing. I keep opacity at 100% always. Flow is the thing that I take down, and that is how I would liquefy and fill in a gap in the hair. I will do one more liquefy, Command-Shift-X, and for this, I feel like my head is turned back enough that it's just a little bit unflattering. All I'm gonna try to do is create a little bit more distance in my neck. So I'm gonna grab this area and sort of bring it back, and I'm gonna kind of construct a new neck for myself a little bit. Pull that up. Maybe pull this down, because all I'm trying to do is create kind of a straight line for me here. Make it bigger. It looks like it's getting a little wobbly. See that wobbliness? That looks weird. I'm gonna straighten that back up. Trying to get a nice straight line. Let's see. I might bring my chin out, make it a little bit pointy, and then I'm gonna try to make my neck look longer by bringing my shoulder down. And then I'm gonna go into the clone tool, and I'm gonna try to clear out that line a little bit. So make that a little bit bigger. I'm gonna sample from right over here, and then I'm just gonna draw. I'm gonna sample again because the color doesn't quite match. And see how this is like down a little bit? I'm gonna sample down and just go up ever so slightly and just start redrawing that line. I'm gonna sample from over here and soften that a little bit more. And I don't want to get rid of like all the wrinkles. All I wanted to do was to soften the expression a little bit, and I'll show you the before and the after. And this might be something that's too extreme for you to share with your client, and I think that that's fair. So please use these techniques at your discretion. I try my best to love myself, love my body, and I don't use like the face altering filters in Instagram because it's really important for me to embrace who I am. However, this is a part of my job, and I feel like it's a unspoken part of the job that it's really hard to find things like this that isn't body shaming in some way. And if you've ever had a photo taken where it kind of doesn't look like you, you know that photos can be very misleading. I also wanted to talk about textures a little bit. So this is my butt. I'm gonna do the exact same thing. I'm going to hit S. I'm gonna sample from a smooth part of my bottom, and I'm just gonna, at 10%, just kind of paint in, and I'm not trying to completely get rid of textures. I'm gonna resample from right here and fill this in. But I'm just trying to smooth things out a little bit. The place where it gets the trickiest is whenever we have like a big dimple like right here. So I'm gonna try to pull from an area that has a similar curve to it. Like if it's a straight line, then you're trying to sample from a straight line. I'm gonna come from up here. I'm gonna try to pull from this area because that looks pretty smooth, and just get rid of that dimple. And there we go. You can also resample multiple times, just like keep grabbing and painting little bits at a time. And that will slowly soften things as you go. I would not do this to somebody's bottom, but I feel like if somebody has like face texture, that is typically a thing that I will get rid of. And every time you see me hit this, I am resampling. Resample, paint a little bit. I'm gonna soften the shadow a little bit. Resample, paint a little bit. Zoom out, and I can show you the before and the after. This is just me getting rid of some of the textures. I don't tend to Photoshop things like cellulite out because it doesn't really hit the 2-week rule, but occasionally there is some bad lighting that will come into a photo, like from a first dance where they have like really harsh overhead lighting. And if something is distracting and ultimately doesn't look like how the person looked throughout the rest of the day because the texture only appears in specific bad lighting, then I think that it's fair for you to get rid of it because this is part of a service that we're providing for people. It is so hard for me to talk about these things because it just feels like this ethical gray area, but I really feel like this is a skill that is nice to have in case there are photos that could be outtakes that you know your client is just not going to be able to love, but they would ultimately love the moment. And I'm not here to be a therapist for my clients. I'm just trying to give them photos that represent how they feel and look. Ugh, I'm gonna keep saying it because it feels so weird. So here's one where I could Photoshop it, but I actually think that this is a great example for something that I could do in Lightroom. So this is my face. This is my face close up. I'm gonna grab the healing tool. I have the healing set to 69%, so I'm just gonna get rid of that little zit. It's gonna pull from over there, that's fine. You can play with opacity. I will probably do that for cysts and pimples and razor burn, things that stick out, but also like texture like this doesn't necessarily appear across the entire face, so I'm just gonna pick a couple spots to sort of like grab different areas on. For the most part, I feel like the healing brush does a pretty good job selecting good examples. This is a bad place. It did a bad thing. This little hair, I might go in and fix it so it doesn't look like I've got a mustache. I mean, I do, but I'm gonna get rid of it here. And this is what we've done so far with just cleaning up some of the texture using the healing brush. I'll zoom out a little bit. So this is just using the healing brush. There are also things that you can do if there's more texture, is take a brush, and there are things in Lightroom that I think are just programmed into everybody's, where it's shadow save, skin smooth plus, soften skin light. I don't know if I made any of these because I've definitely made blue tansy, I think, and bald spot. So if you do not have these, let me know, but I'll show you what the settings are either way. So I'm gonna grab soften skin, and this might have been one that I made, but literally it's just going to make skin look a little bit less textured, and I can show you what the settings are for that. This is just bringing clarity down quite a bit. I am also gonna take down the texture because I feel like that's gonna get rid of the shiny spots more than the reduction of clarity. Playing with clarity is a big one for skin texture, especially when you're like closer up. I'm just gonna fill in a little bit more with this brush, and then I'll show you what it looks like in the before and after. I'm going to remove it. Where's the eraser? Subtract brush. I'm gonna remove it from like around my nose and where some of the shadows are on my lips. from here a little bit, from my jawline. And then this is what the mask looks like before and after. And so it's not much, but especially when lighting is really harsh, I think that textures come out that don't appear during any other time of the day. And so I think that it is fair to get rid of those things, and it's something that you can do in Lightroom very easily without having to take it into Photoshop. We have talked quite a bit about lighting and the role that it plays in making sure that we are flattering our clients to the best of our abilities. So while I am showing you how to do these things, I also want to keep in mind that like the lighting is just bad. Like this is just not great lighting, but I'm gonna fix it so that we know how to fix it. So I'm going to grab my stamp tool again. I still have it at 10% flow. I'm just gonna make it a little bit smaller. And I'm going to grab from a smoother part of my leg and just kind of start brushing on a little bit. I'm gonna pull again from like another texture over here where it's smoother and just try to straighten out this line a little bit. And then I'm gonna do it again and just go over it one more time. And then I'm gonna pull from the dark side and go over it one more time over this way. And then I'm going to go to the side of the leg because I'm looking for like those angles. If you're gonna be cloning from something, you wanna make sure that it matches. So I'm going to grab from here, go up here, make sure that it's aligning with the rest of my leg and just kind of fill in some of those spots. There we go. There was a thing going around in like 2006 that was called Forever 21 Hates Knees, where somebody at Forever 21 had gone through all of the images that they had on their website and had photoshopped out the knees. It was bizarre, but for the sake of showing you bad lighting versus good lighting and how it can create textures that might not appear otherwise, I hope this is helpful. This was just using the stamp tool at 10%. Again, I wouldn't do this to most pictures, but I wanted to find a way to show you the tools, and I feel like this can be a thing that can really help you sometimes. So I am also going to liquify this image because I sewed this shirt myself, which means that one of the straps is like a little bit wonky. And I also feel like sometimes there's a dip in people's arm that happens. Like my arms are pretty normal. I mean, they don't look strong, they just look like noodles. Like sometimes they just get like a bulge and it's normal and it's fine. But a lot of the times whenever people pose, they're like, oh, put your hand on your hip because they want the elongated arm. And if it's something that I feel like is gonna be distracting, if it's something where a client has told me that they are self-conscious about their arms, I want them to be able to enjoy their pictures. So I'm going to fix these things for people that have expressed something like that to me. Not gonna do it for everybody. I'm a service provider and I will do what I can to make sure that people love their images. And if it doesn't look consistent with the way that they look throughout the rest of the day, I'ma fix it. So Command-Shift-X is going to be the Liquify tool. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna fix my strap first and foremost because that strap is wonky. So I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger so it doesn't warp. And then I'm just gonna pull it over and try to make it look more normal. I think that matches a little bit better. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller and push it over this way to try to make the strap look like it's like a, yeah, more firm. I'm gonna push it down on my arm and pretend like it wasn't coming up all crazy like. There we go, more normal. And then I am gonna just make it big enough so that way, I'm trying to think of how to describe it, but the Liquify tool is weaker on the outside and stronger in the middle. So I want to position the center of my Liquify tool for it to be larger, but over to the left of where I'm gonna be pushing in. So I'm gonna start grabbing from over here. I'm clicking and I'm dragging in here, and it's gonna smooth things out without it being too dramatic. So I'm gonna zoom out, and that is how I've changed this image. I've altered the strap. I don't think that it looks horribly different. I think that if anything, it's like slightly less distracting. So that is how to liquify a little arm with it still looking normal. It's still rounded, it's not straight, it's an arm. I'm gonna show you the liquify one more time. So I'm going to fix my shirt that's coming out of the back by making this quite a bit smaller. I'm gonna be pushing from out, not on it, but out here. I'm just gonna grab and start pulling in, and then I'm gonna grab from up here and start pulling in, and then grab from down here and start pulling in. I'm gonna make it bigger because I'm starting to distort these rocks. And I'm just gonna push in a little bit more. And that looks more flattering to me. I'm gonna push in, I'm actually gonna push out right here and then make it bigger and pull in right here. And I'm hoping you're seeing that I'm not grabbing where I need to liquify things, but I'm grabbing just outside of it and trying to push things together. Same thing here, my dress, my homemade shirt isn't perfectly aligned, so I'm just going to bring this down, aiming the middle, kind of like higher up than where I want to push, and trying to make things look more cohesive. I'm gonna push in right here, right there. I feel like that looks pretty good. If I wanted to push this in, I could. I would just like that. And I probably wouldn't leave it any more than that because I don't want to change the shape of my body. I just want to change the bulge that ultimately wasn't there. And I do have a belly when I sit down. That's a normal thing to have, but I don't want it to be distracting. So here it is. Here's the before and here's the after. All I've really done liquifying on in this picture is my clothing articles, which were not hugging me in the way that looked most flattering, in part because of my outfit choices. Here's an example where I am going to change my body shape because of the distortion that's happening with the 24mm, and because I want to be able to show you examples for where I'm changing bodies in a way where I feel like it's ethically fine, because it's really just more distracting for it to be like this. So I'm gonna do Command-Shift-X. So it just looks a little wonky. So all I wanna do is pull up my pants on this side ever so slightly, that it looks like it's the same size all the way around. I'm wearing a peplum shirt that should not have been tucked in, so it's very baggy. So I'm gonna tuck in the extra part of my shirt right there, just a little bit. And then if I wanted to, I could bring in the bottom part of my jeans just ever so slightly, because it is wider at the bottom. And I'm not changing my body too much, but just a little bit. I could shove my shoulders down if I wanted to. I could pull my shirt up a little bit. And this is what I've done. These were bigger changes. Again, I don't think that I would do this for a client's images, but I wanted to show you how to do it just in case. Hair. I'm also gonna go in and show you my armpit hair and how I would touch that up if that's the thing that I wanted to get rid of. It's not, but just in case. So I'm gonna grab the clone tool. I'm gonna grab a sample from an area where I don't have underarm hair, and I'm at 10%, and I'm just gonna start shading it in a little bit. It's quite a bit darker under there, so I might grab from my chest area. This is so intimate, you guys, and I'm just gonna brush over that. I'm gonna leave the creases because I am a human person with an arm that bends, and those folds are necessary for me to be able to move. But this is what it looks like when I fix my underarm hair. Look at that conformity, y'all. This is also not the most flattering lighting, so if I wanted to do something like fix under eye circles, I would do the same thing. I'm cloning at 10%. I'm gonna grab from down lower on my cheek, and I'm not gonna get rid of like the under eye circle all the way up to here, but I would kind of maybe brush out this area just at the very bottom and then leave the rest. If you wanted to grab from another area, you could lighten this area up, but I would not lighten it up too much because I very much don't want to look like a different person. Same thing, I'm just grabbing a sample and touching it up a little bit. If I wanted to get rid of my little mustache, I would grab from up here, and I would just gently go over a few times until it starts to look natural. I will say that I used to work at a portrait studio, and a big part of my job was touching up images. So I would say if you're just starting with touching up, I would recommend making a new layer on top of whatever it is that you're doing, and whenever you're doing things like touching up skin, touch it up and then like reduce the opacity by like 50% because you've probably gone overboard. This is my before and this is my after. I very much still have the flaws that I came in with, but it's just a little bit less severe now, and I hope that seeing it close up is really helpful. We're gonna do one more Liquify that concentrates on some of the clothing bulges that I was having on this day. So I'm gonna go to Command-Shift-X. I'm gonna make my thing a little bit smaller. I'm gonna pull from over here. So I'm gonna start pushing in, and see how I'm distorting the grass? I can make it bigger. I'm gonna undo that. I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger. I'm gonna start from further back, and I'm gonna take smaller strokes and pull the grass kind of around it. And then I can make it smaller when I get right up here, and all I'm trying to do is just make a slightly more straight line. I'm not going right up to where I need to push stuff and starting from there. I'm pushing from the outside in. And same thing over here, we've got a straight line, so I'm gonna try to go with the line as much as possible. But I might just have to straighten it in post. I'm just gonna make it a little bit smaller, and I'm just gonna straighten it up. I don't need to bring in stuff that much, and I actually don't even need to bring it in here. I'm not gonna bring in like the bulge right here. I'm gonna bring this out, which is actually gonna make me look slightly larger, but I think what's distracting is the bulging area and not necessarily my size. I think that's it. I think we fixed where my shirt was not tucked in properly. If I wanted to fix the gap in my bangs, again, I would just do the same thing. I'm gonna hit clone, grab some hair that's going in the same direction, and I'm just gonna fill it in with that 10%. And I only wanna fill in the gappy spots because this is going to be my hair that I'm sort of like brushing up against. And in order for it to look really cohesive and nice, I want that hair to be the outline of where I'm stopping. And all I'm gonna do is brush in that gap. And zoom back out. I feel fine about this. If you wanted to fix these stray hairs, you could always do a lasso tool and then make a little line around it. And one of my favorite things, and we're about to get into more of this, is the content aware fill. So I grabbed a couple of these hairs, and there are lots of different ways to do this in Photoshop, but I'm just gonna show you content aware fill right now. So I'm gonna hit Shift Delete, and this is going to give me different fill options. I'm gonna choose content aware fill at 100%, color adaptation turn on, hit OK. And what it should do is get rid of all those little baby hairs. So I can show you the before and the after. It's gotten rid of some of the little baby hairs. I could do this as many times as I want. You could do the same thing with a clone tool or a healing brush. There are lots of ways for you to do it, but I wanted to talk about content aware fill because we are about to use it a couple more times. So this was a situation where the videographers and I were just not on the same page. They were like, where do you want to shoot? I was like, oh, we should shoot this way so that way we don't have the cars in the background. So they sat all of their stuff on one side, but then they stood on the other side. So then I had stuff on both sides of where the clients were going to be doing their first look, and it was like really tricky. So this is what I was working with. The most that I could do in Lightroom was get rid of their bags and kind of crop them out, but I'm gonna undo all of this and we're just gonna take it right into Photoshop. So I am just going to select the backpack and the shadow of the backpack. Make sure it's all selected. Shift Delete, content aware fill, hit OK. That looks ridiculous. I'm going to grab my own clone tool. I'm gonna change the flow to 45%, and I'm just going to grab this straight line and align it here, and I'm just gonna continue to make a straight line, resampling occasionally as I go down. All I'm trying to do is make that a straight line. I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna grab from back here and just try to make a straight line, meeting in the middle, so that way we've got something that kind of looks okay. Do you see how it looks really like blocky? I'm just gonna go over that. And then here, I'm gonna grab from here and start sampling and just try to make a straight line going this way. I'm gonna grab the grid and get rid of this. So I feel like that looks fine. This content aware fill should work nicely on this car and the camera. That's fine. Trash can, I could do content aware fill. I can see what it looks like. That's fine. I might paint in this little area right here, just so that it doesn't look unusual. And I'm gonna paint in the grass, and I'm going to bring the grass down a little bit so that way that looks more normal. And I feel like that looks fine. We got rid of the backpack and the videographers and a trash can, and I feel like this is a lot less distracting, and the goal isn't for things to look different, but like she wasn't paying attention to the bag. It was 98 degrees out and she just wanted to be with her person. So those are things that I wanna get rid of. Another thing that's super easy to do in Lightroom is touch up hair, especially roots. This is a maternity session where she isn't able to dye her hair. So I'm going to add some red to her hair. I'm gonna grab the brush. I'm gonna start brushing on where I roughly think that I'm gonna want something to go, and then I'm gonna start editing after that. So I touched up where I think the roots are gonna go, and then I'm going to see about warming up the roots. I feel like that looks pretty good. I might add some clarity and see how that looks. I don't know that I love that. I don't like reducing the clarity either. Dehaze, some of this is just trial and error. I actually feel like dehaze works a little bit for this hair. I might bring down the highlights and test, yeah, bringing down the white seems to help. I'm gonna add a little bit of contrast and no saturation. I don't like that. Let's see about shadows. adding some shadows helped. So this is something you can do in Lightroom very easily for somebody like maternity session. If somebody expresses to you that that is a concern that they have, this is a technique that you could apply to things like bald spots. If you're photographing a dog that has a hot spot, you can use this in a combination of the clone tool to get rid of that hot spot if they just need to be looking pretty and normal for family pictures. Anyway, I hope knowing how to do this technique is something that you can think about how to apply it to other places, because it is something that you can do in Lightroom without having to take it into Photoshop. Another thing that's pretty easy for you to take care of in Lightroom without having to go into Photoshop are things like sweaty spots and shine. Super easy to take care of in Lightroom. I'm gonna zoom in on this image and show you what we were dealing with straight out of camera. There was quite a bit of redness in his face. This was another very hot day and we didn't have any air conditioning, so everybody was hot walking out. I'm going to show you what the clone tool looks like. I've got clone tools happening on the face because I basically went in and grabbed from the non-shiny areas and took the shine out using the clone tool. Quite literally, I'm just gonna make the clone tool tiny. I'm gonna turn the feathering up a little bit, make the clone tool a little bit smaller. Just gonna grab the shiny areas and reference less shiny areas. You can take the opacity down to like 75% and have it still be a little bit shiny without it looking distracting, if that's a thing that you wanna do. And you can pull from as many places as you would like. I'm not going to do all of these, and I'm not gonna get rid of things like wrinkles. I really just wanna get rid of the shine because I think the shine is distracting from the moment. I would probably get a color. And I keep my reds pretty dark, so I think for these images that he's in, I'm gonna bring up the luminance and maybe make the reds a little bit more orange, so that way it looks more normal. You can kind of see what that looks like. I'm just making them less red. We're going from this image to this image without ever leaving Lightroom. That being said, if you're ever having a hard time in Lightroom with something like shine, if you go into Photoshop, you can do the same thing. I'm gonna use the clone tool. I'm gonna sample from an area that is not so shiny. I'm gonna go back down to 10%. Flow, because I'm working on skin, and I'm just going to keep resampling from the areas that match tonally but don't have shine, and just make the shiny area a little bit smaller. I might take off a little bit of the sheen on her cheek but leave some of it because ultimately I feel like it just looks glowy, and I might decrease the shadow on her forehead just because it only shows up in like this specific lighting and I didn't see it any other pictures on the wedding day. So I'm just going to get rid of that a little bit and smooth that out. There's a little texture right here. I can get rid of that with 10%. It doesn't have to be perfect. I'm just trying to reduce the look of it so that way it's not a distracting element. Make it a little bit less shiny. If I wanted to fill in this little gap, I could. I don't think I need to, but I can. I'm gonna zoom out. I'm gonna help him out. He's ever so shiny. It's really not bad. Grab too much. There we go. I'm gonna get rid of this because that's just a little distracting and I'm not sure what that shadow's from. And there we go. So here is the before, here's the after. I'm just gonna zoom in, before, after. We aren't making dramatic changes, but I wanted to show you how to do it in Photoshop as well. So I'm gonna do one more round of like quick content aware fill stuff. This was fine, but people kept walking through. So I'm just gonna grab the people, even his foot, shift, delete, content aware fill, go. This is very easy. You can do something, oh, missed a spot. I'm gonna grab that. I'm gonna get rid of this little flag. I'm gonna get rid of this little guy. And this is not something that I would do to every photo, but we really wanted a photo with this tree and it was just a super busy area in New York. So this is the before, this is the after. We didn't do a ton, but using content aware fill can be really helpful if you wanted to do something where, say I didn't get the composition exactly what I wanted it to be here. If I wanted to make this area a little bit bigger, I could go like this and then select all of my white area. And then see if content aware fill was gonna do stuff. That actually doesn't look terrible. I would say that this side got a little dicey. It wasn't quite sure how to fix some of this. But if you ever have a client that orders an 8x10, but it's like cutting people off, you can just make the entire canvas bigger, content aware fill, and then crop it back down to an 8x10 if it ends up looking good. And last example, this was such a hot day. But for this one, I just made masks and I can show you what these look like. This is a mask where I was using the settings with the clarity turned all the way down, contrast turned all the way down, and I just went in, and I can delete this mask if you just want to see it. Create new mask, brush. I'm gonna do clarity all the way down, contrast all the way down, and I'm just gonna make my brush smaller and go around and sort of paint in all the really shiny areas. And this is going to reduce texture because we were in really harsh lighting, and it's also gonna make things look a little bit less shiny. I feel like this is ever so slightly distracting for me. And just throw it in a couple spots. There we go. Perfect. I also just pulled in a couple gradients for this one, but this was the before image. This is the after. All I was trying to do is make things a little bit less shiny, and I did go in and clone where this, like, the information was gone because it was so shiny. So I can just like grab that area, bring it to some neutral skin, and I have it set at 75%. So it's not getting rid of it all the way, but we are getting less of the shininess for sure. So I wanted to make this video, and I was trying to make it and phrase it and present it in a way that feels ethically and morally aligned with the things that I believe and the things that I want to contribute to society. So I'm having a really hard time with this one, but I really hope that seeing these techniques in action is helpful in some way. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here. I am excited about sharing an article with you soon that is a bunch of prompts that I shared with a group of photographers, and they were like, please share that on Patreon. So I'm gonna be sharing that with you in an article next. If you have any questions about this, if you wanna see anything else like this, if you wanna see how I Photoshop more stuff, please let me know, because my BFA, my Bachelor's of Fine Arts degree, is in basically Photoshop. So I've got the skills, and I'm happy to talk about it. Cool. Thanks so much for watching, and I will talk to you soon.